There are moments in our lives that profoundly shift who we are. I suspect that you know what I'm talking about. There was that time a friend invited you to a party, and standing in line for the punch bowl, you met your life partner. Or the one afternoon when at the back of a garage sale, you found a dirty, old, but still serviceable guitar. Your uncle taught you a few chords and you joined a band. Or when back in high school, when you could not get into the class you wanted, you were aiming for something easy. You wound up in physics and unexpectedly found your career. Or, well, you know your life. You know the unanticipated twists and turning points where one possibility opens and another closes. Scholars like to refer to this as contingency. Naturalist Stephen Jay Gould names it as the central principle of all history, over and against theorists who would reduce life to the laws of nature or economic and sociological phenomenon, the old historical materialism of my Marxist friends. Gould and others like him suggest individual events or actions or decisions matter. If an asteroid, or was it a comet, had not smacked into Earth some 66 million years ago, the dinosaurs might still rule the planet. No space rock, no age of mammals, no primates, no human evolution, no you, no me, no First Unitarian Universalist Church of Houston, contingency. The same holds true for the tattered tapestry we call human history. Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette might have escaped their bloody fates if that Jean-Baptiste Drouet had not recognized them by chance as they fled Paris in a carriage. No end to the French monarchy, no French Republic, no Napoleon, and suddenly if Drouet had turned his eyes the other way, the entire history of Europe is different. The history of the world is different. And so it goes.
Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they crucified my Lord?
Sometimes it causes me to tremble. And here we arrive at the entwined contingent events that structure this morning's sermon. The life that was Jesus, and the theologian Howard Thurman's interpretation of that life. Thurman's name is likely familiar to many of you. He's the subject of today's sermon in our continuing series, Lives of the Spirit. In a sense, he's been with us throughout it. His famous 1953 sermon series, The Way of the Mystics, inspired our own modest efforts. His scholarship helped us define a mystic as someone who finds within their own experience that opens up to the infinite. Mystics locate within their own contingent events of their lives, the unexpected conversation at the punch bowl, the battered guitar, the mystery of the mathematical equation, a flash of the universal, the infinite within the particular. Within the particular lives of our exemplars. Last month we had a beautiful sermon from Reverend Scott on Dorothy Day. we have the opportunity to delve into the crucial questions that animate our lives. What does it mean to lead a good life? What are the resources that will allow me to lead such a life? How shall I know that I'm leading one?
Were you there when the sun refused to shine? Were you there when the sun refused to shine? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when the sun refused to shine?
Sometimes it causes me to tremble. Thurman was a black Baptist minister. He was all of 35 years old when he and his wife, Sue Bailey Thurman, found themselves in conversation with Mahatma Gandhi. They had gone to India on a pilgrimage of friendship that intended to connect the struggles of African Americans with the independence movement to push the British out of India. Both, they each understood, were part of an interconnected effort to free the world from colonialism, imperialism, and white supremacy. Sometimes it causes me to tremble. Gandhi and his guests narrowed in on two topics. First, they discussed the sorrowful state of Christianity in the world. And second, the potential of nonviolence to end empire. Sometimes it causes me to tremble. Gandhi told the Thurmans that the greatest barrier to Jesus Christ in India was Christianity as it is practiced. The Thurmans agreed. Though he did not share the story with Gandhi, in his agreement, Thurman likely recalled what he had learned from about Christianity from his grandmother. Nancy Ambrose had been born into slavery. She lived on one of those forced labor camps we euphemistically called plantations until the Civil War. As a child, since she could neither read nor write, Howard was tasked with reading the Bible to her. Together they would cover, as he recalled, many of the more devotional psalms, some of Isaiah, the Gospels again and again. But never Paul. He was verboten, as my own German-speaking grandmother would say. But Nancy Ambrose never explained why. Thurman went away to college. He read all of the Bible for himself, and he came back to visit his grandmother and see where he had grown up in Daytona, Florida. And so he finally asked her about Paul. And here is how Thurman recalled her reply. During the days of slavery, she said, the master's minister would occasionally hold services for the slaves. Always the white minister took as his text something from Paul. At least 3 or 4 times a year, he used to pick, slaves, be obedient unto your masters as unto Christ. And then he would show how it was God's will that we were slaves, and how, if we were good and happy slaves, God would bless us. And so I promised my Maker that if freedom ever came, I would not read that part of the Bible. Thurman thought about his grandmother's story for years. It seems a key to understanding why, as he put it, the weight of the Christian movement has been on the side of the strong and the powerful against the oppressed. He considered Jesus. He reflected on Paul. He searched for the differences between the master and the first great interpreter of Christianity. Both men he knew were Jewish by blood, training, background, and religion. But there was a desert and a sea between them. A desert and a sea between them. The difference came down to this. Paul was a Roman citizen. Jesus was not. Paul had all of the privileges that came with citizenship. If a Roman soldier was taking advantage of him, he could make a direct appeal to Caesar. Thurman reflected. His life and person were under the protection of the Roman state. Jesus was entitled to none of that. Born in occupied Palestine, to poor parents, a member of the working classes, Paul was part of the educated elite. Jesus was at the mercy of the powerful. As Thurman put it, if a Roman soldier pushed Jesus into a ditch, he could not appeal to Caesar. He would just be another Jew in a ditch. The distance from Jesus to Paul was the same as the distance from the bottom to the top of the ditch. The first was haunted by insecurity, was, in Thurman's words, part of the masses who live with their backs against the wall. They are poor, the disinherited, and the dispossessed. What does our religion say to them? Christianity as it is practiced, returning to Gandhi's critique, it is a little unclear how much Thurman shared with his Indian interlocutor. But we return to it because Gandhi's critique clarified for Thurman that Paul had taken the religion of Jesus and turned it into Christianity. The religion of Jesus, Paul's Christianity, the distance between the two. Jesus was the religion of the disinherited. Christianity, though, he recounted, gave sanction to the religion of the system of slavery. It justified a Christian nation in which black people are segregated, lynched, and burned, Gandhi told him. The task, Thurman realized, was to put aside Christianity and to recover the religion of Jesus. This he summarized as, you must abandon your fear of each other and fear only God. You must not indulge in dishonesty or deception, even to save your lives. Your words must be yea and nay. Anything else is evil. Hatred is destructive to the hated and hater alike. Love your enemy that you may be children of your Father who is in heaven. Hatred is destructive to the hater and hated alike. Love your enemies. Now, I would be speaking untruths if I claimed that I successfully followed them. Thurman certainly struggled with them. Living during segregation, the humiliation of Jim Crow could fill him with rage. And yet,
we are climbing Jacob's ladder. We are climbing Jacob's ladder. We are climbing Jacob's ladder. Soldiers of the cross.
The second topic that they covered was nonviolence. The two men recognized that while they came from different religious traditions, Gandhi was a Hindu, they were both animated by what Thurman named ethical and moral devotion. So they sat together. Gandhi offered a prayer. Howard and his wife responded by singing, "Were You There?" and "Jacob's Ladder." And the Indian philosopher outlined his conception of nonviolence. The word was one he had coined, though he didn't much like the term. It is no negative force, he told Thurman. It was instead the power of life itself. It was leaning into his visitor's religion, the kingdom of heaven. It was found by living the creed in your life, which must be a living sermon. Your life must be a living sermon. The religion of Jesus, Gandhi, and Thurman believed that there can be no distinction between our ethics and our actions. We are what we do. For Paul, religion was a matter of belief. For Thurman, Gandhi, and Jesus, it was a matter of action. I sometimes summarize this position as the resurrection of the living. The phrase comes from the Gnostic Christian text, the treatise on the resurrection. There we find the answer to the query, what is the resurrection? It is the truth standing firm. It is the revelation of what is, and the transformation of things, and a transition into freshness. It is that wisdom found in so many of the world's religion that tells us that the purpose of life is to fully engage with the present moment and the people in front of us. Perhaps it is best summarized by Buddha's answer to the question, "Are you a God?" with the simple words, "I am awake." I am awake. Your life must be a sermon. The distance from the bottom to the top of the ditch. Thurman took all of this and he had the realization. He recognized that the key to nonviolence and the key to authentic religious practice were the same thing. They were the recognition of the full humanity of each and every person. We Unitarian Universalists like to summarize this as the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Thurman used theistic language. And part of our practice of Lives of the Spirit is to get a little uncomfortable and try to get a glimmer of the world from some of the perspectives of other spiritual activists and teachers. And this means that we sit with things sometimes that are not easy or which rest upon theological concepts or use language that might challenge our sensibilities. And so for a moment, I want to invite you to draw upon one that comes from the tradition of African American preaching that inspired Thurman. It drives to his core of the teaching that both religion and nonviolence, when they are truly practiced, are the same thing. And it touches on the idea of glimpsing the infinite within the particular. So here's what I want us to do. I want to pause our sermon for a moment and invite you to turn to your neighbor and say a few words. I want you to say to them, "You are a child of God. God loves you. There is no one greater than you but God." Now, you might find the language uncomfortable. We can recast it in our humanist terms by saying, you have inherent worth and dignity, and no one has more inherent worth and dignity than you. But for Thurman it was, I am a child of God. God loves me. There is no one greater than me but God. We each have inherent worth and dignity, not one person more than the other. I want you to sit with those words for just a minute. I mean, really sit with them. Sit with them, especially if someone has been unkind to you this week. or if anyone has ever told you you are unworthy. You are a child of God. God loves you. There is no one greater than you but God. You have inherent worth and dignity. No one has more inherent worth and dignity than you. Their significance for Thurman is expressed in the second reading from this morning. There he tells us, we may not be able to stop and undo the hard old wrongs of the great world outside, but through you and me no evil shall come. Thus between us we shall cancel out all private and personal evils. When we recognize that each person is equally a child of God or has the same inherent worth and dignity, take your pick, we arrive at nonviolence. The human life of each and all must be honored and respected. The blind action and reaction of violence, which comes from when the perpetrator fails to see the full humanity of their victim, leads but to more violence. We see this now as Israel resumes its assault on Gaza. The horrors of the bombing being organized by an Israeli defense minister who has called Gazans human animals, rather than saying, you are a child of God, God loves you, there is no one greater than you but God. We see it also in the life of the great moral monster who died this week. Henry Kissinger reduced human beings to numbers and justified atrocities with the depraved calculus of power. No inherent worth and dignity in his actions and teachings, only blind action and reaction. War crimes by one party, Hamas, will not be prevented by, do not justify war crimes on the part of another. The opposite of all of this is that ancient Jewish teaching that each person is a universe unto themselves. As the Talmud tells us, whoever saves a single life, it is as if he or she has saved an entire universe. Gandhi inspired Thurman to accept teachings like this as the core of nonviolence. Thurman recast them as his interpretation of the religion of Jesus, a poor, working-class man living under occupation without access to the rights of citizenship, one of the disinherited and dispossessed. This he attempted to capture in his 1948 book, Jesus and the Disinherited. I'll say slightly more about that book and Thurman's life in a moment. But before I do, let me tell you how the conversation between Gandhi and Thurman ended. After praying together, after sharing song, after discussing nonviolence, Gandhi turned to Thurman and said, well, it may be through African Americans that the unadulterated message of nonviolence will be delivered to the world. Sometimes it causes me to tremble. Thurman was not any theologian or preacher. He was the mentor of Martin Luther King Jr. His friendship with King's father started when the two men were in college at Morehouse. Thurman told King about his time in India and his experiences with Gandhi. King was one of the first readers of Jesus and the Disinherited, and said that it established for him a true ground of personal dignity. He carried the book with him almost everywhere he went. It brought him courage and shaped his philosophy of nonviolence.
Were you there when they rolled the stone away? Were you there when they rolled the
Sometimes it causes me to tremble. If Howard Thurman had not gone to India, he would not have met Gandhi. If he had not met Gandhi, he might not have come to his understanding of nonviolence. If he had not grasped nonviolence and its connection to the religion of Jesus, he might not have written the Jesus and the Disinherited. And so it goes. Without that, perhaps no civil rights movement. Sometimes it causes me to tremble. The infinite in the particular. A few final anticlimactic words about Thurman's biography. He was born in 1899 in Daytona Beach, Florida, to a family one generation out of slavery. He grew up in the segregated South and routinely witnessed and experienced the awful violence of white supremacy. He was the first member of his family to attend college, and his gifts were recognized early. After college, he was one of the first black students at his seminary, Rochester Theological Seminary. Martin King also went there. After graduation, he was called to Oberlin, Ohio, before being hired by Morehouse to teach philosophy and religion. And then from there, went on to Howard University, where he was the first dean of Rankin Chapel. He left Howard to organize the Church of the Fellowship of All Peoples. This was one of the first intentionally interracial churches in the entire country. At the time, it is estimated that only 8,000 African Americans worshipped alongside white people in congregations. Sunday morning, paraphrasing King's famous words, was the most segregated hour of the week. There is much about his efforts that we could learn from his time in San Francisco. We may return to them in a later sermon. But as a preacher, I will only note that I have learned a great deal about what it means to offer worship from the sermons he crafted at the time. Our Lives of the Spirit draws inspiration from the last series of services he led while in San Francisco, The Way of the Mystics. He left the Church of the Fellowship of All Peoples in 1953 to become the first black dean of the chapel of a historically white university, Boston University. There, he and King renewed their friendship. He retired in 1965 and continued to write and mentor religious leaders and activists until his death in 1963, or his death in 1981, Sometimes it causes me to tremble. The infinite in the particular. The last words that Thurman offered to his congregation in San Francisco before he left for Boston came from Dante's The Divine Comedy. When Dante's guide through hell and purgatory, the Roman pagan poet Virgil left him at the gates of heaven, he turned and said, "This is as far as we can go, as I can go no further. From now on, you are on your own. This is as far as we can go. From now on, you are on your own." The intention of our sermon series is to point the ways. The teachings of the spiritual masters are their own. You will find in them what you will. Perhaps they will help you wake up to the beauty of the world. Perhaps not. But really, at the end of every sermon, not just this one, what I should be saying to you is what Thurman said as the closing words to his own congregation. This is as far as we can go, as far as I can go. From now on, you are on your own. But let's not quite leave things there. Instead, let's leave them with the words inspired by the that Gandhi thought Thurman captured the hope for the struggle of justice.